Hello everyone, and welcome back to another Mirror Dungeon solo video. In today's episode, we'll be using Kurokumo Rodion, a fairly solid identity and the one that I hate the most. It might seem a little strange that my most disliked identity is decent as opposed to a bad one, but if she was bad, I could very easily just write her off and ignore her existence like I do with every other bad identity. She has quite a lot of potential in her kit. Being a poise identity with a very powerful skill 3 means she is not lacking for damage or clash power. The problem is that her only source of poise count is on her skill 2, which only provides 2 count and means she can never realistically keep a stack alive. Oh, what's that? You're saying her counter has poise count on it? No, it doesn't. Once you're at 5 poise potency, it gets converted into her skill 3 and loses its ability to give both protection and poise count. What does it take to reach 5 poise potency? A single use of her skill 2. In the best case scenario, you use 2 skill 2s into a skill 3 or counter, and while you do get a very powerful attack, you also entirely lose your poise stack afterwards. And that's assuming you never actually crit on any of her skill 2s. This makes her entirely 100% reliant on outside poise count generation, and I absolutely despise that. Poise is the one status effect that I believe should never have to rely on outside effects to keep a stack alive. The solution to her problem is incredibly simple. All she needs is for her counter to give poise count on combat start instead of on use. That way she would still gain the poise count even when it gets converted into a skill 3. Anyway, none of my rant actually matters during a solo run, as like I said, she entirely relies on outside poise count generation, and what better way is there to give that than literally any poise ego gift? Which is exactly why, for our starting gifts, we choose Wound Clarid and Little and To Be Naughty Plushie. What? You thought we would take poise gifts? No, literally all she needs is Blade Lineage Yi Song's support passive, and she can easily keep a stack alive. But still, my point still stands. She shouldn't be required to use him to be any good. For the first floor, we choose the Forgotten and easily make it to the boss against G-Corp. They are really not that threatening, but being the first boss of our run, we can never really let our guards down. Fortunately, with the ability to use our skill 3 as a counter, we can pretty much guarantee that every time an enemy attacks us, we stagger them in retaliation. If not for that, they would have certainly ended up staggering us instead, but with more than enough poise generation thanks to Blade Lineage Yi Song, and an on-demand skill 3, we're more than capable of finishing them all off. We take Smokes and Wires for our reward and receive Lithograph as a bonus before heading into the Unconfronting for the next floor. Here we buy Coffee and Cranes, Eclipse of Scarlet Moths, an extra skill 3, and Devil's Share. For the boss, we're up against Chrom, one of the most scripted fights in the entire game. For literally any identity, the only way to get through her first phase is to force corrosion by turn 3. This isn't difficult to accomplish, but it does require having picked up an ego resource generating gift earlier, and certainly helps if you have access to a Wa ego. After corroding, you need to make sure you're clashing with both of her Purify skills, otherwise she'll stagger you the next turn. Afterwards, you need to make sure you actually have enough damage to stagger her, otherwise she'll just grip you again and force a reset. We don't have any of these problems and can force her into her second phase after both of us decide to take a nap for a turn. The second phase is infinitely easier than the first, but that doesn't stop me from trying to make it as close as possible by missing 2 heads rolls and nearly getting staggered. This wouldn't be that bad if not for the fact that we get inflicted with a ton of paralysis, making clashing the next turn nearly impossible. Even with careful strategic clashing to ensure the paralysis isn't much of an issue, Rodion tries her absolute hardest to lose the fight by rolling as many tails as possible. The biggest weakness of single coin skills is without a doubt the 5%, as nothing can save you from that.
제가 만약 도시에서 야구 선수가 되어 홈런을 날렸더라면 이런 기분이지 않았을까.
승객이 따끔 한 번 먹였어. 적들이 흔들흔들. 배는 맛있는 편이 좋은데. 조이 하나가 끊어졌네요. 이제 좀 수월해지겠어요. 적합한 관리법이었어요. 다행이에요. 역시 누구나 쨍그라. 보이가 조각났어. 계속해도 돼.
Through sheer determination, we manage to win the fight and take Squalidity as our reward, before moving on to Emotional Flood for the next floor. We fuse 4-leaf clover and make it to the boss of the floor, KQE, a pushover of a fight and barely even a boss. With only 3 skill slots and doing barely any damage, he doesn't pose much of a threat. Despite this though, with our blunt weakness, he was still doing enough damage to stagger us, so with a single use of Rhyme Shank to give us better resistances, we can make it to the 3rd turn where KQE's main gimmick starts. Normally he puts you into captivity and does unavoidable damage to you. Not enough damage to really matter, and honestly, if any enemy deserves a buff, it's KQE. With 3 skill 3s though, we have more than enough damage to completely ignore his terrible gimmick and stagger him. This forces him to do nothing for 2 turns, first because he's staggered, and second because if he gets interrupted, he just sits there until his cycle resets, resulting in an easier than normal fight.
제가 만약 도시에서 야구 선수가 되어 홈런을 날렸더라면 이런 기분이지 않았을까.
배는 맛있는 편이 좋은데. 승객이 따끔 한 번 먹였어. 배는 맛있는 편이 좋은데.
We take Phantom Pain as our reward and Nebulizer as a bonus before heading into Treadwheel Sloth for the next floor. Here we buy Rusty Commemorative Coin and find Arrested Him, while we also fuse Red Stained Gossipium before heading into the boss against one of the most difficult enemies in the game, the Dream Devouring Slit Current. It's Silt Current, isn't it? It's Silt Current. The Dream Devouring Silt Current. I keep saying slit. It's not slit. It's not. Ah. Even though he is an incredibly difficult fight, he's even more difficult than normal as his gimmick royally screws us over. Sure, he does blunt damage, which is scary, but the single paralysis he inflicts every turn is the real killer. With our most powerful attack being a single coin, it means we cannot clash with him at all after the first turn. We would be able to deal with this if not for the fact that Blind Obsession will absolutely annihilate us if we don't stop it. Taking a page out of Chromer's book, the best and most consistent way to deal with this is by forcing Corrosion, as obviously negative coin skills don't care about paralysis, but more importantly, it's virtually impossible to avoid getting staggered in the first place. The hardest part of this fight was actually getting one of the corroded skills to target Blind Obsession, as it's entirely up to RNG. Unfortunately, even after the corrosion, we still didn't manage to break its fluorescence, resulting in us having to deal with the paralysis for an extra turn. This, coupled with the fact we are at neutral sanity, means we cannot win any clashes and end up getting staggered again. Luckily, Mr. Silk Current loves to inflict sinking as well and ends up corroding us in the process, letting us finish him off instead.
방금의 일격은 매우 좋았습니다. 제가 만약 도시에서 야구 선수가 되어 홈런을 날렸더라면
배는 맛은 있는 페니쇼입니다. 왜 높이 먹들이던 거야? 파란색. 그분의 잡으신 모든 것을 방금 어떻게 하신 거죠? 깜짝 놀랐어요. 모든 것을 칼날이 잘 드네요. 아마 그 공격이 약점이었겠죠? 그분의 잡으신 모든 것을 승객이 딱콩 한 방 먹였어. 그분의 잡으신 모든 것을 완벽한 한 방. 시원한걸? 그분의 잡으신 모든 것을 엄청난 공격이었어. 기념할 만한걸?
We take Gathering Skulls as our reward and head into time-killing time for our final floor. Here we buy Greycoat, Late Bloomer's Tattoo, and a bonus skill too. We manage to find Painkillers and Warning Notice as well as buying Resolution and Respite. And finally, we fuse Clear Mirror Calm Water and Finifugality before heading in to face the Time Killer. He's nowhere near as difficult as the big fish, but being able to apply bleed and having high rolling attacks, he certainly isn't a pushover either. We're more than capable of matching his rolls, and by using a single ego can stagger his robotic allies, disabling them for the time being. We can easily push him into the second phase of the fight with our high DPS, but the real issue with this is the sheer amount of dangerous attacks coming at you. Even the minions are capable of threatening us with lots of damage, making it very difficult to choose which attacks to prioritize. The further we make it into the fight, though, the easier it becomes as we gain more and more skill slots. Eventually, we end up slowly taking out the minions, and once we do, all of our attention can be diverted to the Time Killer, who crumbles shortly after, unable to keep up with our DPS.
제가 만약 도시에서 야구 선수가 되
역시 내가 못 빼는 건 없어.
And that's how I soloed Mirror Dungeon 4 hard with Kurokumo Rodion. All around a very powerful identity who is entirely limited by her lack of poise count generation. She also doesn't have any bleed count, but she does have access to Sanguine Desire, which kind of alleviates that problem. All Project Moon needs to do to fix her is change her conditionals for her counter to be combat start instead of on use, and she will easily be a top tier identity. Anyway, that's it from me. Like and subscribe to not miss next time where we'll be using this individual. Goodbye!